Okay. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to tonight's Planning and Development Control Committee meeting. My name is Councillor Omid Miri. I am chair of the committee. Just going to run through some housekeeping points before we begin. This meeting is being live streamed to the council's YouTube channel. So by participating, you are consenting to being recorded. If the fire alarm sounds either continuously or intermittently, I will adjourn the meeting. Please leave the meeting in an orderly fashion by the staff fire exit, which is behind me to my right. And officers will direct you to the assembly point in Riverside Gardens. And there are toilets on my left-hand side. I think that brings us to the end of the housekeeping. Just to remind officers, if they can introduce themselves before they speak, that would be great. Before we move on to item 1, I'd like to introduce 2 new members to the committee, Councillor Nicole Trey and Councillor Ross Melton. Welcome. Very pleased to have you. I'd also like to give my thanks to the former members, Councillor Rebecca Harvey and Councillor Wesley Harcourt, for their years of service on the committee. I think in Councillor Harcourt's case, decades of service on the committee, and also for their expertise and for their contributions. And I think Councillor Carmel would also like to say some words about Councillor Harcourt.
I will genuinely miss him. Members who've been on this committee for a while know that we played tag, so to speak, between ourselves. We were the last, I suppose, of the old guard, so to speak, which either leaves me as the most experienced member of the committee or the most over-the-hill member of the committee. I'll leave you to do it. His insights and his institutional knowledge, I think, benefited this committee to a huge extent, and he will be sorely missed.
Thank you very much. And just to reassure everyone, he is alive and well and safe. He's just no longer a member of the committee, but I'm sure he'll be very pleased to hear those words. And Councillor Harvey as well, who also had many years of service. Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. We now move on to item 1, which is apologies for absence, and we do have apologies from Councillor Souslous and Councillor Chabot-Verdier. Item 2, declaration of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest? No? Okay, great. And now we move on to item 3, which is minutes of the meeting held on 16th of April 2024. Are the minutes agreed? Great, if that can be noted. And that brings us to the first application, which is item 4. And can the presenting officer, Neil Egerton, please introduce the report whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Neil Egerton, team leader for the North area. The presentation covers both this item and the subsequent one. There's 2 applications for Roberts House, 99 to 103 Hammersmith Road, one for planning permission, one for listed building consent. The application essentially is for the change of use of the 1st, 2nd and 3rd floor levels from offices into 6 residential units and some small alterations. The listed building consent also covers the change of use, as well as internal alterations to include installation of secondary glazing to windows and replacement of some secondary glazing as well, and creation of partition walls in connection with the formation of the new habitable rooms. The application site is a 4-story plus basement properties in this terrace here shown on the map. The application site is in red and the rest of the terrace is shown there in blue. The properties are listed grade 2 listed buildings. The listing was approved in 1983. The site was originally built in 1824 and comprised sort of shops with residential accommodation above. Over the years, there's been a number of changes, and there's still retail at ground floor level on many of the units, but and offices on the upper floors. In the case of the application property, the ground floor is retail use, but currently vacant. There is a gym at basement level, and then say vacant offices on the upper floors. Got an aerial view here from looking from the north, showing the site highlighted there. And a view from the rear, showing the access to the site from the rear. And you can see plant contained in the roof space for the existing offices. These two views, you've got the rear of the site on the left here, showing the cursor, and then the front elevation here. And you see the retail shop front still is retained there, although I say that is currently vacant. This part of the rear area where there's bin store, existing bin store and the cycle storage, and that'll be increased as part of the application. This is the upper floor at the moment. It's laid out and fitted out as how it could be used for offices to help with the marketing of the units over the last few years. The lower floors are there waiting to be fitted out. This is the front elevation of the existing, or proposed, sorry, front elevation. There's no external changes, and so really the main change will be internally with the secondary glazing and the partitions, which will not be visible far from the windows. Rear elevation there, and then the side elevations. This is the elevation adjacent to the road, and then that's the other end of the block there. You can see the cycle and bin storage in the rear there. At the moment, you say the ground floor retail unit is vacant. There's a reception area here. You come in here, and the lift and stairs into the upper floors, cycle storage as well. And then you have 6 flats set out here. The partitions for the rooms do not affect the windows. The listing, although it covers the whole building, is primarily concerned with the external facade of the building. So the application being designed to no changes to the external facade. The unit sizes are all in excess of the minimum requirements of the London plan, and the room sizes are all compliant as well and greater than normally expected. This just shows some of the context looking from the rear of the site, the rear windows, and again to the front and the side. Just across the road from 66 Hammersmith Road, vacant office building at the moment. Officers have reviewed the marketing and information. On balance is judged to be acceptable, the change of use. The conversion back into residential dwellings is considered to be consistent with the original purpose. The alteration to mine would not harm the listed building or conservation area. For existing residential amenity, the windows are existing, and so there'll be no real change on the impact for neighbouring properties. The proposal will be car permit free, and cycle parking will be provided. There's a noise there was an objection, concern raised by the gym in the basement about whether their operation would have some impact on the residential use or vice versa. I mean, there is a floor in between the gym and the residential units, and apart from that, we have a condition for enhancement soundproofing anyway. So there should not be any impact on the gym's operation or vice versa. All units say meet the minimum nationally prescribed standards. There's some non-compliance with regard to northern-facing windows fronting Hammersmith Road in terms of light, but those are bedrooms only and would not justify refusal on this basis. And I think, given the listed status of the building, it's hard to configure it otherwise without having harm perhaps to the external facade. There's no new gas connections, and fire safety information provided. It'll also bring the listed building back into use. Section 106 will cover permit-free development, and then the contribution of 120,000 towards environmental improvements in the vicinity of the site. As such, officers recommend planning permission and listed building consent be granted for the proposal, subject to the conditions in the reports, and obviously then any changes to the heads of terms or minor change to the heads of terms legal agreements will be at the discretion of the Director of Planning and Property. in consultation with legal service and the chair of planning. Thank you.
Neil, did you want to talk through the addendum as well?
Yes, thank you very much. There is an additional condition being added with regards to provision of installation commissioning certificates of electric induction cooking stoves in the kitchens. And then there's a paragraph 5.13. Unfortunately, an earlier iteration of that paragraph was left in the report and wasn't amended, so the revised paragraph is here. And then in paragraph 5.14, there is a reference to a provision of a barouche, which is a typing error, should be brochure. So,
okay, thank you very much. And I think we'll take these consecutively. So first we will we'll discuss and vote on this item and then the listed building consent, if that's okay with you. Okay, so in that case, I would like to invite Matt Humphreys, who's the agent. If you would like to speak, yeah. If you'd like to come, okay. Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you. So just to confirm, Matt Humphreys has waived his right to speak. Thank you very much. In that case, we move on to committee members' questions to officers for clarification. And Neil, I do have a question just to start things off. So the gym in the basement, is there access from the residential units directly into the basement, by which I mean, can a resident from one of the upper floors access the gym without coming out onto the street, as far as you know?
I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that. The plans do indicate, if I show the ground floor plan, that there is, obviously the residents would come in from the front here, number one, with the reception and the lift, and then there's also an entrance from the rear. There's a stair down, which is here in the middle, but I would have to say that I can't say that whether they can or not access that basement.
Sure, thank you. I appreciate you might not know the details. Just looking at this floor plan, how do people enter the gym now? Is it from the stairs in the middle of that picture?
I don't know.
Not sure?
The gym isn't part of the application.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
yeah. Would you like to just put the mic on?
I believe from plans and having a look on Google Earth, they have their own front entrance on Hammersmith Road, the next building down.
Okay, that's useful to know. Yeah.
I think it's just commercially run as a separate unit.
Yeah, absolutely. No, my thinking is just that if residents could access it internally, that would actually probably be a benefit to the gym and to the residents. Okay, thank you. Yeah, any other questions? Yeah, Councillor Walsh.
Thank you. Just regarding the questions regarding the gym as well, I believe the last committee we had discussion around protections of the development in regards to any future complaints that may occur. I'm conscious that some gyms are open potentially 24 hours. Some of them will also play music inside their space as well. In terms of this development also being residential, has there been any noise measurement done to see would this be affected, and also any sort of protections for the current commercial tenant or commercial owner from future noise complaints?
So obviously the existing gym is in the basement, and then there is a separate retail use at ground floor level between the gym and the proposed residential units on the upper floors. So there's already soundproofing between the gym and the vacant commercial unit at ground floor level. There's also a condition 10 here, which requires the details of enhanced sound insulation for the walls separating commercial parts of the premises from dwellings. So there'll be additional improvements to the existing soundproofing as is. So officers don't think there will be any concerns or any impact on either.
Okay, so there should be adequate protection, both in terms of any future residents, but also that the gym can continue operating as needs be.
Yes, I mean, the condition requires that the sound insulation is enhanced by at least 15 decibels above the normal building regulations requirements. So it is there to really ensure that good quality sound insulation is provided, which will further enhance the.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Connell.
Yes, just start with paragraph 2.3, the neutral comment, where it says, Charlotte Mews is not the name of the servicing road to the rear of the application site. Charlotte Mews is a private road unrelated to the site. Does the site have rights to access that mews? And if not, what does that mean for the application with regard to, as I read it, their plans to utilize the mews?
Yeah, if you look at the map there, it's actually Charlotte Terrace is the area behind the site that it'd be serviced from, rather than Charlotte Mews.
Perfect. And the second one is the ventilation system that is to be used, given that Hammersmith Road is one of the most polluted roads in the borough. Are officers satisfied? Because it looks quite small for these buildings. Are officers satisfied that it will be sufficient to protect the health of future residents?
Yes, that has been considered by our air quality team and air quality officer, and they were satisfied and comfortable with the proposal. I mean, the condition condition 6 obviously requires the submission of a ventilation strategy report to be provided prior to the commencement of above ground works, and then a post installation report under condition 7 to demonstrate that it has been effective. Meaning, certainly from my experience, our air quality colleagues treat this matter very seriously and will robustly check any proposed system to make sure it is correct for the job.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any other questions for officers? No? No further questions? Okay, great. In that case, we'll move on to voting. Firstly, we'll vote on whether recommendation 1 in the report is agreed, and that's on page 10. And I'll just read it out for the benefit of everyone here. Recommendation 1, that the Director of Planning and Property be authorised to grant planning permission upon the completion of a satisfactory legal agreement and subject to the conditions listed below. I'll call all the members' names, and you can say you're voting for, against, or not voting. So firstly, Councillor Melton, will you be voting for, against, or not voting?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Trey?
For.
Councillor Walsh?
For.
Councillor Carmel?
For.
Councillor Pascu-Tibure?
For.
I'll also be voting for, so that recommendation has been approved. Now we vote on recommendation 2, which is also on page 10. I won't read that out. It is on page 10, just underneath the first recommendation. Councillor Melton, will you be voting for, against, or not voting?
For.
Councillor Trey?
For.
Councillor Walsh?
For.
Councillor Carmel?
For.
Councillor Pascu-Tibure has been approved. And now I think we move on to item 5, which is the listed building consent. Neil, if there was an additional presentation you wanted to give or anything you wanted to add on that one?
No, there wasn't.
No? Okay. And are there any questions on the listed building consent? No? Okay, then we'll vote on that. We'll vote on recommendation 1, which is on page 40. Councillor Melton?
For.
Councillor Trey?
For.
Councillor Walsh?
For.
Councillor Carmel?
For.
Councillor Pascu-Tibure?
For.
And I'll also be voting for. So that has also been approved. Thank you very much. Now we move on to item 6. Oh, excuse me. I seem to have missed out recommendation 2. Thank you for pointing that out, which is also on page 40. Councillor Melton?
For.
Councillor Trey?
For.
Councillor Walsh?
For.
Councillor Carmel?
For.
Councillor Pascu-Tibure?
For.
And I'll also be voting for. So that has now been approved. Thank you very much. Now we move on to item 6.
Agreed.
And sorry. Item 6, can I please ask the presenting officer, Anissa Aboud, to introduce the report when you're ready? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The next item on the agenda is known as advertisement hoarding adjacent to 3 Blacks Road. The proposal seeks permission to display a freestanding internally illuminated digital LED screen measuring 5 meters in height, 3 meters in width, and 0.26 meters in depth, facing Hammersmith Bridge Road, positioned at a height of 3 meters above ground level. The application site relates to part of the pavement on Blacks Road. Sorry, I'll just start sharing again. Okay. Thank you. The application relates to part of the pavement on Blacks Road, which effectively forms a service road to the rear of commercial buildings on King Street, and these buildings present their rear elevations onto the street. In terms of the heritage assets, the site is located in the Hammersmith Broadway Conservation Area. The site is located opposite the Grade 2 star listed St. Paul's Church. That's this pink building to the south, and various Grade 2 listed tombs within the churchyard. To the east lies Grade 2 listed Bradmore House. That's this building right here. And further to the north lies the Grade 2 listed public house known as the Hot Poles. The site is also located within the designated Hammersmith town centre boundary, and the character is mixed, including offices, retail, residential, and community uses. The context of the site is dominated by highway infrastructure and large commercial buildings, with the Irish Cultural Centre directly to the east. That's this building right here. The image on screen shows the proposed site layout, including the existing street furniture and the tree canopy. This is the view from Hammersmith Bridge Road. There is a large tree in close proximity to the site. As such, a condition is attached to ensure no harm to the street tree, and that's listed as condition 7 within the report. There is a directional information sign located to the near side of the carriageway, approximately 17 meters to the west. That's this sign right here. The angle of the proposed advert has been amended to be more perpendicular towards Hammersmith Bridge Road so that it does not sit directly behind the directional information sign and could be processed in the same view by the driver on the approach to the site. Both TfL and Council Highways officers are satisfied that the proposed advert display would not conflict with traffic signage on this approach. The site was previously occupied by a 48-sheet landscape digital advert approved in 2008. The screen was removed by the previous tenant and the site has been vacant since October 2021. The proposed advertisement display would be a portrait-style, internally illuminated digital LED screen supported on a single pole. Conditions are attached to control the illumination levels and the time intervals between each image. The portrait display would have a significantly thinner frame than the previous digital advert screen and would appear as a slim structure in the street scene. The quality of the external metal cladding to the frame and support structure would be secured through condition. Overall, officers consider the design, size, sighting, and method of illumination of the proposed advert to be acceptable in visual amenity terms and would not have a detrimental effect on residential amenity or on highway safety. It is considered that the LED advertisement panel would not harm the character or appearance of the Hammersmith Broadway Conservation Area or the settings of the adjacent designated and non-designated heritage assets. It is considered that the Highway Safety Report provides a robust assessment of the proposal, and for these reasons, officers recommend the application for approval, subject to the conditions listed in the report, including the changes noted in the addendum. The addendum notes that the condition 4 has been replaced with a more precise condition, which refers to the 300 candela per square meters between dusk and dawn, but effectively it's the same condition as before, but slightly more precise. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And we have no speakers, so we can move on to questions for officers. And who would like to start the questioning? Councillor Carmel.
Thank you. Just a couple of points of clarification. As far as I can tell, am I right in thinking that position of this proposed billboard is on the public highway?
I have an image on screen which will show that it's actually on the pavement on Blacks Road. So it's quite difficult to see from the images, but on this image, hopefully you can see that where there's this lighter colored pavement, that's where the previous screen was, and that's exactly where the new screen would be going.
Yeah, I understand that, but what I'm struggling to comprehend is if it's part of our pavement, how could the previous advertisement be removed by the previous tenant? Was there somebody sleeping rough on the street there who was the tenant of the pavement?
So the site was leased out to a third party who had rights to erect a sign there as part of the planning application, but it is a council-owned site.
So not that it's a planning matter, but just to satisfy my own curiosity, the council will be getting rental for this. Okay, thanks.
I'd presume so.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, Councillor Trey?
Yes, sorry. I'm fairly new to this, so please excuse me if this isn't relevant. But you say there's likely to be a rental. Have we asked the tenant that will be putting up the billboard if the council could actually have time on the billboard to use? Is that not allowed as a question?
No, go ahead, complete your question. Councillor Carmel, if you could just let all members complete their questions in full. Yeah, go ahead. That was your question?
Yeah, it was my question.
Okay, great.
Did I finish the question? Did you understand the question?
Go ahead.
Could you finish the question with the last part? was left
Whether,
on?
as the tenant, will be paying the council a lease rental, we understand that whether they could, within the negotiation, agree for the council to run adverts on that billboard, for example, climate messages to local residents.
So just to clarify, I think the question is, will the council be able to use the billboard to advertise council messages to residents?
So effectively, this is part of the commercial portfolio of the council. As the planning department, we don't have a say on the commercial side. This is a separate matter. But what's before us is the advertisement screen, whether we grant permission to that screen or not. What goes on there as part of the commercial portfolio, etc., that's out of our hands.
Yeah, I think legal would like to come in.
Oh.
Yeah, Matt, go ahead.
Yes, the content of what goes on the screen is not a planning matter. And so that'd be a property dealing between the council and the lessee.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Through the chair, I'm Matt Butler, Assistant Director of Development Management. Yeah, that's the point I was going to say. Whatever you may approve, you wouldn't fetter what we've presented before members, the recommendation and the conditions. It wouldn't fetter in any way what actually goes on there and what the council may or may not decide to put on there with any tenant.
Thank you very much. Yes, Councillor Pascal-Tubere.
Thank you very much. Having used the roundabout quite a lot of times, both on four wheels and on two, it's quite a confusing roundabout. You've got to be pretty experienced to sort of navigate your way around it. So I'm just looking for assurance that putting this up won't have a material detrimental effect on road safety by just having something that confuses particularly inexperienced road users at quite a tricky junction.
Yep, so the applicant have submitted a detailed road safety audit and a highway safety report, which outlines the assessment that's been carried out to ensure that there'd be no harm to pedestrian and road safety users. And the key thing is that the sign itself has been repositioned so that it doesn't directly sit behind the existing directional sign. So that's this sign right here. And because there's a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit, drivers are going at a reduced speed so that they have time to take in both the directional sign and then eventually when they come to the proposed signage that there isn't a conflict there. And in terms of the actual traffic signals, that's some distance away when you go further to the east.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have any other questions? No further questions? Okay, great. Now we move on to voting on recommendation 1, which is on page 45. Councillor Melton.
4.
Councillor Tray,
4.
Councillor Walsh,
4.
Councillor Carmel,
4.
Councillor Pascu-Tebere,
4.
and I'll also be voting for. And now we move on to recommendation 2, which is also on page 45. Councillor Melton,
4.
Councillor Tray,
4.
Councillor Walsh,
4.
Councillor Carmel,
4.
Councillor Pascu-Tebere,
4.
and I'll also be voting for. So that application has been approved. Thank you very much. Now that brings us to item 7. And can I please ask the presenting officer, Tom Scriven, to introduce the report whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. The application site relates to 165 to 167 New Kings Road, and it's located to the south side of the road. It's an adjoining pair of 3-storey mid-terrace properties. The existing day nursery on the site occupies the ground and basement levels, and the separate self-contained residential properties above the ground floor and on part of the ground floor at number 167. Site falls within the Sturridge Street conservation area, and immediately to the opposite side of the road is Parsons Green conservation area, and it's in a PTAL area of 4, with Parsons Green station located 0.3 miles northwest of the site. In terms of the proposal itself, it's a variation of condition in relation to application 2020-03423/VAR. And the conditions being varied are condition 3, which is going to be varied from 70 pupils to 90 pupils. Condition 5 relating to the hours of use. Essentially, it will be opening quarter of an hour earlier, so 8 o'clock till 6 in the evening, as opposed to 8:15 till 6 in the evening. And then finally, conditions 4 and 7 would be updated from the old Class D1 to Class EF to reflect the new use class order, but that wouldn't actually make any material change on site. These variations to the pupil numbers and hours of operation would reflect the 2 temporary permissions which have been in place since August 2020 to allow this was essentially to allow the impact of these changes to be assessed. So therefore the proposal is essentially seeking to make the previous temporary permission permanent. And just in terms of having a look at the site in a bit more detail, this is the front elevation. So it's these 2 units in the middle with the blue canopy on the front of number 165. And on this aerial photo here, you can see the nursery building in the middle of the terrace. And there is also another nursery close to the site. And just in terms of the conclusion, the nursery has been operating at this expanded capacity of 90 pupils, along with the extended hours between 8 AM and 6 PM for approximately 4 years. During this time, the council has received no formal complaints on the basis of noise, disturbance, highways, or any other grounds. The continued use of this community use in its expanded form would contribute towards meeting local need. There are existing conditions in place to ensure that any noise impacts remain within acceptable limits, and subject to conditions including requirements for an operational management plan and updated travel plan, it's considered the proposal would not unacceptably impact upon highways. There's one update to the report, which is to omit condition 16, as this wasn't actually relevant to this particular application, and the recommendation is to grant permission subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I see that we have a speaker registered, Simon Wallace. Simon, whenever you're ready, if you'd like to come to the seat, and the button on the right will go green, and then you'll be ready to speak, and you have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Excuse me. Simon Wallace. I'm a planning director at Savills. I'm here representing Pippa Poppins Nursery, who are the applicants. Pippa Poppins is a long-established nursery school on New Kings Road that has been in operation for some 30 years, although it has grown in size over this time. The school provides a valuable service for local residents, as well as being a local employer. The temporary permission to allow up to 90 children and to operate between the hours of 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. was first granted in August 2020 and again in September 2022. When the temporary permission was first granted, the officer's report stated that it was unlikely to cause an unacceptable increase in noise impacts detrimental to the amenity of neighbours, but that it should be granted on a temporary or trial basis in order to establish whether or not it would have any undue adverse impacts. There has now been a period of nearly 4 years in which to monitor the impacts on neighbour amenity and the impacts on traffic generation, parking and pedestrian safety. There have been no complaints made to environmental health, the highways team or planning enforcement, and this is confirmed in the committee report. Pippa Poppins is a well-run, professionally managed nursery. It is rated outstanding by Ofsted and provides an exceptional learning environment for children of 1 to 5 years. There's no doubt it will continue to be well run and provide a service for local residents. The catchment area for the school gives priority to those in the SW6 postcode. Indeed, there's currently a waiting list of 166 children, with 74 wishing to start in September. By allowing the occupancy level to remain at 90 children, this need and demand can be met. The school abides by the condition limiting the hours of use of the outside play area and limits the number of children outside at any one time to 32. Again, there has not been any complaints regarding its use. The school will prepare an updated travel plan to build upon the measures already in place, which seek to discourage car use and encourage walking, cycling, and the use of public transport for both staff and parents. All parents are informed of the school's car-free objectives, and the admissions policy gives priority to those families who live closest. Staff have cycling facilities and a cycle to work scheme exists. These measures will help the drive to continue to reduce the use of cars by both parents and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much, Simon. Thank you. If you'd like to return to your seat, that's great. Thank you. Okay, so now we move to questions for officers. And just to clarify, Tom, so since 2020, this site has been operating in this manner. So what we are doing, if we approve this application, is we're regularizing a temporary state of affairs. And to my mind, we're actually using this opportunity to tighten some of the conditions as well. But just to clarify, since 2020, it's already been operating in this way.
Yeah, that's correct. So it's been operating in this same manner with this same number of pupils for this same time period since 2020. And as you say, we're looking to put on, well, reimpose the requirement for a new travel plan to get them to update, you know, what they've been doing and try and improve on things in terms of highways. But also we've added a requirement for an operational management plan to try and deal with how they'll be looking at sort of informal parking, but also trying to stagger arrivals and departures, again, to try and help with any impacts on highways.
Great, thank you. And in that time, again, no formal complaints.
That's correct.
Great, thank you. Do we have any other questions? Yes, Councillor Carmel.
Just lost the agenda on the screen. I was looking at something else. A couple of questions. I noticed paragraph 6.26 talks about the travel plan that was page 72 off the top of my head. Get down there. the travel plan in 2020. What was the time scale for the implementation of the travel plan, please?
My understanding is that it had to be implemented at that time. So whilst the temporary permission was running, they had a travel plan in place. But we're now looking for an updated one to then move forward and be reviewed over the coming years.
Do we know, looking at the first bullet point in 6.26, whether the nursery card mode share was reduced from 35% of pupils and parents who travel by car to 28%? Or if not yet, at what stage are they currently at?
I don't have that information in front of me, sorry.
I think I read somewhere in that, and I can't find the actual line in the report, that I think I saw mention of the fact that there is staff car parking. Where? Because I know that area very well. Indeed, the next door building used to be some 20 odd years ago, used to be a club that I was a member of. So I do know the area quite well.
Yeah, I don't believe there's any separate car parking. If there is any such staff car parking, it could only be parking permits. Because I can't see that there's any vehicular access to the site at all.
Yeah, I'm sure I did see it somewhere, but I can't actually. Yes, in 6.2535, it says staff parking facilities are provided.
I think perhaps the highways officer might like to add something here. Thank you.
I think the reference to parking is in relation to cycle parking rather than car parking. So I think that maybe the way it's been written is incorrect, but it's actually in reference to cycle parking.
Not incorrect, just slightly misleading.
Yes. And then in relation to the travel plan, that's why we've asked for, as part of a condition, an updated travel plan so that we can get updated reviews of mode split, so that we, if required, depending on what they submit, we can require them to update their targets and be more ambitious.
Lovely, thank you. I just on a point of personal reflection, when I put my two children through nursery, I think that in between the age group, I think in 6 years we went once by car because it was absolutely pouring with rain, and quite why they have to have 35% driving is another matter. And on another reflection, I would imagine that the large waiting list is likely to come down with the imposition of 20% VAT on the fees.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councillor Pascu-Tiburi.
Thank you very much. This sits on my patch, and the nursery is a really terrific local asset. It's very, very good news that that numbers are expanding and there's such a healthy demand for it. One of the issues that does exist is people being dropped off or dropping off by car and parking and manoeuvring on Chipstead and Quarrendon Street. Could the traffic plan have specific measures to aim to discourage that? Because that does create some real congestion, some real issues at quite a tricky time in the morning.
Yeah, we asked for an additional condition in relation to an operational management plan so that the nursery can be more proactive, to be more neighbourly, to not to discourage that kind of activity that would impact on the surrounding neighbours. So that's part of that. So they would have to introduce initiatives to discourage that, and we would be scrutinising if they submit.
Warmly welcome that. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? No further questions. Okay, great. So now we'll move on to voting on whether recommendation 1 in the report is agreed. That's on page 57. Councillor Melton?
4.
Councillor Trehi?
4.
Councillor Walsh?
4.
Councillor Carmel?
4.
Councillor Pascu-Tiburi?
4.
I'll also be voting 4. And now we'll move on to recommendation 2, which is also on page 57. Councillor Melton?
4.
Councillor Trey,
4.
Councillor Walsh,
4.
Councillor Carmel,
4.
Councillor Pascu Tabure.
4.
And I'll also be voting for. So that application has been approved. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now we move on to item 8. And Tom, whenever you're ready, please introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. The application relates to Quennington Mansions, 2 adjoining purpose-built blocks of 8 flats located to the northeast side of Rostrevor Road, close to the junction with Swift Street. The buildings form part of a terrace on this side of Rostrevor Road and consist of 3-storey mansion blocks with partial basements below and identical rear projecting outdoors. Just in terms of the conservation area, it's located within Central Fulham Conservation Area. You can see on the plan, the site's just in here. So it's right on the edge of the conservation area. The boundary of the conservation area is actually the rear boundary of the site. Just in the street scene, it's these 2 blocks here with the identical front entrances. In terms of the proposal itself, the intention is to renovate and refurbish the blocks and introduce renewable energy provision. This would improve the energy performance of the building and reduce the reliance on carbon-based energy sources. The proposal involves the following elements. So it's predominantly at roof level where they're looking to erect a plant room enclosure with air source heat pumps, looking to install 58 solar panels, the erection of some associated safety balustrades, the installation of automatic opening vent roof lights, and the raising of the parapet walls and the installation of new insulation. And in terms of the other changes, it's also looking to replace the existing single glazed timber frame windows and doors with new double glazed windows and doors, along with a small number of additional windows and doors across the building. And finally, to provide a refuse store and cycle parking, along with some associated landscaping. On this site plan, you can just see towards the bottom and the front of the site, this is where the new refuse storage is going. That's actually below street level, so you wouldn't be immediately visible in the street scene. And then the sort of informal cycle storage, it's towards the back of the site along this side. And that's in a shared area. Just moving on to the roof plan. The proposed roof plan shows the more extensive elements of the scheme with the solar panels distributed across the whole of the roof. And the plant enclosures is these blocks here towards the middle, well, towards the rear of each building, but located relatively centrally. On the front elevation, you can see that the solar panels and the other associated equipment is predominantly screened behind the parapet, but you've got the 2 plant enclosures located centrally within each front elevation. On the rear elevation, again, you can see the 2 plant enclosures. And on the side elevation, you can see that it does have a slight pitch down to the front of the building to just try and slightly decrease the massing where possible. And then this is the other side elevation. Essentially, you can see it's being replicated across both buildings. This is the 3D imaging showing the view from Swift Street, which is the primary sort of long view that you'll get of the proposed enclosure. Within this view, you can see this most prominent element in the street scene, and also how the materiality has tried to blend in as much as possible with the skyline. This slide just shows internally what is in that enclosure. So you've got the air source heat pumps and the associated acoustic screening in the back section, and then the slightly lower section to the front has all the other associated equipment. And that also has a circulation space to allow for maintenance of these various bits. And this is the section drawing of that plant area, just showing the relative height of the various bits of equipment and how it's located across that plant enclosure. And then in conclusion, the proposal is to renovate and refurbish these residential blocks to improve their energy efficiency and to introduce on-site renewable energy sources in order to reduce the reliance upon carbon-based energy. It would result in a positive benefit in terms of sustainability and energy efficiency in accordance with policies CC1 and CC2 of the local plan. The site is within a conservation area, and however, given the siting scale and use of suitable materials, it's considered overall that the proposal would result in less than substantial harm to the character of the conservation area, and then this harm would be outweighed by the public benefits of the scheme in terms of sustainability and providing this for 16 units within the 2 mansion blocks. In terms of neighbouring amenity, it's considered to be acceptable with regards to outlook and light, and also there's conditions imposed in order to ensure that it doesn't have a significant impact in terms of noise. And then subject to further conditions, it's also considered acceptable in relation to all other material considerations. There's one update to the committee report set out in the addendum. That's just a slight correction to paragraph 1. And then there were also 2 additional letters of objection received in relation to the application. These matters had already been raised previously, so they are already covered in the report. The recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We have 2 speakers registered for this item. Firstly, I'd like to invite Nicholas Schober, who would like to object to the application. And Nicholas, when you're ready, you have 3 minutes. Once again, it's the button on the right, which will go green whenever you're ready to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and Committee, for letting me speak today. My name is Nicholas. I live on Hazelwood Mansions, top floor with my wife and 2 children. 4 of my 8 windows face the top floor of Kennington Mansions. And the report of the council makes it sound all very benign and diminutive. But when you sit in my study or kitchen, the expected rising up of a 3-meter high plant room has a terrific impact on my sleep because the light is going to go away. And I would like to summarize 3 points here. Point number 1, in August, I consulted a daylight sunlight surveyor to help me with the case. They sent a letter on 13th of September to the council asking for a detailed sunlight daylight assessment to understand the impact. 68 documents have since been filed. A daylight or sunlight report has not been submitted. Point number 2, the council's report mentions HS7 of the Council Supplementary Planning Act, February 2018, where it says the plant enclosure should not impede 45 degrees of my sunlight. When you read HS7, it also speaks about existing re-extensions in addition to that. And there's a different limit. There's 15%, not 45 degrees. 15% should not be exceeded. And I would argue even without the assessment, 15% is exceeded. And point number 3, I'm all for the green transition. I have 2 young kids. Sustainability is at the forefront. But this is a substantive property. There are more locations for the heat pumps. The developer has excluded the rear garden, which I would find a good location, on the grounds of noise, leaseholder amenities, and impracticability of deploying the heat pumps. I would argue all 3 reasons apply to the roof as well, plus the additional harm to Hazelwood Mansions. So to summarize, guidelines and regulation should apply to everyone, and an important decision like the location of heat pumps should not be driven by the commercial interests of one party. A sunlight daylight report was never filed. The limit is 15%, not 45 degrees, and the rear garden might be a better location. With that, I thank you for your time. This is a first step in a long journey. I owe it to my children to protect daylight for them, and I protect my right to potentially seek further steps in a judicial review. Thank you.
Okay, Nicholas, thank you very much. Thank you. We now have a second speaker, which is Helen Cuthbert. And Helen, whenever you're ready, please come to the desk. And once again, it's the button on the right. And when you're ready, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm here on behalf of the applicants who are Dorrington, who are a leading residential landlord in London, established in the 1930s and are passionate about protecting and enhancing historic buildings. They acquired Quennington Mansions in 2018. The building, surprisingly, was previously in the same ownership since its construction more than 100 years ago, when the mansion blocks relied on coal fires for heating. So there have been quite some change since then. They are hoping to upgrade the entire building to minimise the environmental impact. And just to respond to the comments you've heard tonight, we've explored the garden as an option. I think it's a simpler option, but there is simply not sufficient space to retain the gardens for the residents and put in the air source heat pumps. This is something that we have explored with the council's officers since last summer. So we've been working quite closely on how to minimise the impact of these proposals. The key design ambition is to improve the environmental standards of the building. And we've looked at planning, heritage, energy, noise, and daylight, and officers are satisfied we meet the policy tests. As you've heard, the air source heat pump will be provided in a central location on the flat roof, replacing the individual gas boilers that are in each flat. There will also be PV panels on the flat roof as well, which supplement the energy demands of the building. And the approach is entirely in line with your council's new SPD on climate change, adopted by the council in October last year, seeking to use heat pumps and PV panels in the interest of maximising on-site carbon reductions. We will be reducing the carbon use by 50%, just under 50%. So it's something quite significant. In terms of the impact on neighbours, the 45-degree rule is met and there is no significant loss of daylight or sunlight. That is on the basis of the initial test. There doesn't need to be a further examination of sunlight and daylight because the first test is passed. If you think about it, it's a bit like a pitched roof. Because it's set centrally, it's equivalent to a pitch. And in fact, the height of this enclosure is lower than the adjacent pitch roof on the adjacent building, and is lower than some of the chimneys. So it's not a substantial addition. And where it's located means that your sight line and therefore your daylight and sunlight views are not impacted by it. The application before you tonight has attracted objections as it's a new addition to an existing attractive building in the conservation area and obviously involves the new technology. It isn't harmful, but it does represent change. And I think that's the issue we have to grasp. We have to grasp that in conservation areas and on attractive buildings as well as in new build. Otherwise, we will not get to our climate change requirements. Happy to answer any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Much appreciated. If you'd like to return to your seat, thank you so much. Okay, now we move on to committee. I'm sorry, it's just the allocated time. Now we move on to committee members' questions to officers for clarification. And my first question is around this issue of daylight and sunlight assessments. Can you speak to that? What assessments were carried out? How confident are officers that this wouldn't, represent a massive reduction or harm? And just to the first speaker's point about assessments not having been carried out, if you could just clarify that, if you could. Thank you.
Yeah, so there's a test set out in the planning guidance SPD HS7 part 1, which relates to the impact upon windows located at a lower level than a particular development. The test that it specifies should be carried out in this case is a 45-degree angle taken vertically from those side-facing windows. If there was a breach of that angle, then potentially we would have asked for a daylight and sunlight assessment. But because there was no breach, given the separation distance and given the relatively low height, it wasn't considered reasonable to request an extra sort of degree of assessment for a scheme of this scale, which is meeting the test that's set out in the planning guidance SPD.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is, can you tell us, I mean, the second speaker kind of sort of referred to this, but what did the applicant or what did the developers try to do to conceal the enclosure? Did they try to do more? The garden was mentioned a couple of times in both the statements. Was every avenue explored by the developer?
So within their submission, they did set out how they sort of tested it to begin with to decide where was the best location. The garden was looked at in terms of it being a potential area that these air source heat pumps can go. The garden's terraced though, so it's not necessarily immediately straightforward to put a structure of this scale in there. There's also two quite substantial trees there, which are protected because it's in the conservation area. There's also the fact that you're losing amenity space, albeit shared amenity space. So there's quite a few factors there that led to them then exploring the roof as a possible location. Once that had happened, we've been pushing quite hard to see if, you know, had they fully explored the garden. We're satisfied that they have. They also slightly reduced the scale, as I was saying, to the front of the enclosure, and they changed the materiality. So it's that lighter tone, which will hopefully help it blend slightly better into the skyline. So I think hopefully that sort of summarizes it.
Yeah, and there's nowhere in the building where the enclosure could have been, simply not enough space.
There's no space for something like this in the building because it's all flats.
Flats,
essentially. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions? Yes, Councillor Walsh.
Thank you. Just for clarification, what is the visibility of this from this street level? How much of this is going to be visible?
So you don't have a 3D image from the immediate street level, but when you look at the this image in the street scene, so this is sort of from almost the opposite side of Rostrevor Road. I think you can see that something that's set that distance back and only has a height of between 2.1 and 2.6 meters, you're not going to perceive it in the immediate street scene, which is why we had that longer view in Swift Street being more of a concern, because you need to essentially get that far back in order to then be able to start to perceive it in any real way.
So in terms of the general character of the conservation area, a person walking along the street is unlikely to have their eyes drawn to the particular addition, other than if they're, as you say, approaching from that further away area.
Yeah, essentially along Rostrevor Road. I think Rostrevor Road, you'd be hard pushed to see it, I would say. But like I say, we don't have the 3D imagery, but I think from here you can see that given the height of the buildings and how far it's set back, it'd be very, very difficult to see it. But yeah, as you're saying, I'll just quickly go to that Swift Street view, which is the longer view. So then, yeah, you start to see it because you are now further away from the site. Yeah.
And in terms of the servicing of the building, I know you showed a picture there of, I think, the access to the maintenance. Could you identify how they will access from the, I presume, through the main building itself up onto the roof?
Yeah, so this is the access point here.
Okay.
The automated opening vent. In terms of how, I don't have the internals, so I can't show you where that comes up in the building. I assume it's a communal area because that would make sense, but I don't have those internals.
Okay, I'm happy to go with your assumption that it is something that can be easily accessible and serviced for the foreseeable future. Just finally, just to make a comment, which is obviously, you know, as a borough, we did declare a climate emergency a number of years ago, and there has to be substance behind that rather than just noise itself. So we do have quite a significant number of listed buildings, quite a number of conservation areas as well. So this is encouraging to see, obviously, steps being taken to get to that net zero that is obviously talked about a lot, but policies and actions have to be taken as part of that as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And a 50% reduction is significant. Yeah, so I would agree with your comments. Councillor Trey.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to bring up on below the proposal. First of all, there's the roof level erection of the plant room, but it also says erection of safety balustrades. And from a street level, I would have thought those safety balustrades would have made more of a design impact difference. You know, I do appreciate that it's going off on a bit of a tangent from the resident, but also. Well, if you answer that first about the balustrade, thank you.
So on here, you can see the balustrade. So it's labeled number 4. I know it's quite hard to see, but it's basically this little area here. So it's only the area immediately in front of the plant enclosure on each one. The rest of the safety is essentially by, I think it's wires on the roof that you can attach to. So you've only got the balustrades, again, quite centrally located. So a bit like with the enclosure, I mean, I'm not sure you'll be able to see the balustrades at all, but if you could, you'd have to be stood quite a long way back in the public domain anyway, in order to see them. So they don't go all the way around the edge of the roof, essentially.
That was basically answered my question, because then, you know, we're talking, this is only safety for a relevant person that would be working on the industrial side, and that we're not adding balustrades in order for people to use it as a roof terrace.
Yeah, so there's a condition on there as well that the roof can only be the access to the roof and going on the roof. It can only be used in association with maintenance of the equipment on the roof, and it can't be used as a terrace.
Thank you. Just before I come on, I just want to have as much clarity as we can on this. Can officers assure us or reassure us that Nicholas's sense the daylight and sunlight coming into Nicholas's property won't be adversely impacted, and that it won't create a sense of enclosure, and that he won't be sort of plunged into darkness and won't, you know, his whole sort of, you know, residential amenity will be ruined? Can you assure us that won't be the case? Because that is an important consideration.
Yeah, and I think you can see in the report, we looked at neighbouring amenity quite closely. It's quite a long section of the report. In terms of our guidance and what we consider to result in a significant loss of light or outlook or overbearing impact, it passes that relevant test. So if we were looking at a comparable extension on a, you know, a similar layout of building, we would be coming to this same conclusion, because we'd be applying the guidance that we use on every single application, and that would be the conclusion that we would reach. If it was something that failed the guidance, then we may well need that additional information in terms of the daylight and sunlight assessment in order to then prove that there isn't a significant impact. But based on our own tests, we consider that there isn't one.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councillor Pascal-Toubury.
Thank you very much. If I'm reading this carefully, one of the problems raised is the fact that the extension is towards the back of the building, because it's the windows on the side returns of the neighbouring building that would be affected. Given the fact that this is pretty rapidly emerging technology, is there a chance that a development of this size for this level of environmental improvement might actually become obsolete quite quickly, and then in a couple of years you might be able to do something with the same environmental impact but a lot smaller?
I mean, there is a potential that things like that could change over time. Obviously, it's quite hard to say how much that will change and how long it will take for that to happen. So it could be that in years' time this does become obsolete and perhaps there is something else. But I suppose at the moment we have to look at it based on what is the existing equipment that is available and what benefit that provides, and decide whether or not that's acceptable.
Completely agree. And of course, we don't really do counterfactuals.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Kamal.
Thank you. I've got a few things. I'll just start on carrying on from points made by Mr. Schober, if I pronounced his name correctly. Would it be fair to say that there will be a loss of sunlight and daylight, and there will be a loss of outlook? I'm not saying that it breaches any of the guidelines, but it would be fair to say that this is going to impact adversely on a neighbour.
I think there's a difference between something being visible and having an adverse impact, which is why...
Sorry, Councillor Kamal, if you could not interrupt. Yeah, carry on.
Which is why the test is there, for us to determine whether or not there would be that the sort of significance of the impact would be such that it would be starting to adversely impact the neighbour. So that's why the test is there to start with. Sorry, yeah.
I very carefully did not say adversely impact. I said there would be an impact.
So, Councillor, just to kind of confirm on the other part as well, in terms of the outlook point, I think there is an acknowledgement that this would have some visibility when you're looking out of those rear windows. Now, what we've worked quite hard with the developers to do is select face materials, particularly for the acoustic screens, that do blend in, as you could see within the, I don't know if we can go back to that Swift Street view, that do give that perception of it being, you know, a lighter material that does hopefully blend within the sky to mitigate any perceived change from that. That kind of, I suppose, appearance when you have outlook from it, both from these kinetic views, but also from the neighbours, and that's something that we've worked quite hard to get the developer to really think carefully about in terms of the tonality of those materials and how they do hopefully try and blend as much as possible with the sky, really.
I'm sorry to interrupt your questioning. What is that material exactly? And is it some kind of, you know, see-through kind of material, or can you just clarify that?
Can we go back to the detail on that? So the material itself isn't completely perforated, obviously, because of the acoustic performance, but it is a material that again is different to the appearance of the host property, purposefully to try and give the perception again of it being lightweight and something that does blend within the sky. Let me just, I'm just trying to find the actual product detail.
And actually, while you're looking for that, Tom, in this image, I think we can see the garden there, which is sort of stepped, terraced, and that's what you were referring to.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Matt.
Sorry, just in the meantime, it might help through the chair, it might help committee just to clarify the 45-degree angle line. This test we use sits within, I think Tom mentioned it earlier, within supplementary planning guidance. So it's not part of the development plan, but it's still, you know, a material, you know, heavyweight material consideration sitting within supplementary planning guidance. And it has, it's, if you like, it's been around for a long, long time. It's tried and tested. We've had it in a number of iterations of our supplementary planning guidance, the 45-degree angle, and it's seen as that appropriate balance in a dense urban borough like Hammersmith. It's seen to strike that balance between allowing people to extend their properties, carry out development structures such as this as well, while still sufficiently protecting neighbouring amenity in terms of outlook and overshadowing. If it does breach that line, then we're in a different area and we need to look at it more carefully. On-site judgment comes into play, the particular circumstances of the site, and then potentially a more technical assessment may be required, but because it didn't breach in this instance, we're fairly confident it strikes our appropriate balance.
Okay, thank you. Alan?
So I'm still looking.
That's okay. Councillor Common, if you want to carry on. Well,
thank you very much. You referenced policy HS7, and you rather glossed over the breach of HS6 from to the neighbours on Chesilton Road, where in 9.7 of the report it says no, I should not breach a 45-degree vertical angle when taken from the ground level on the rear boundary. The proposed plant enclosure would breach this angle. However, the existing rear outrigger of the building already breaches this angle. Blah, blah, blah. The impact of this enclosure is not significantly greater than the existing situation. So it will worsen the existing situation by how much, please?
I think when you can see on this image that if you were to draw a 45-degree angle from ground level on the rear boundary, it would hit, I can't draw one here and now for you, but it's going to hit somewhere along here on the existing rear outrigger, much closer than this structure on the roof. So the actual perceived impact, there is a slight increase in the massing of the outrigger, but this is set a long way away from the boundary compared to the existing rear wall. So that's why we have looked at that key principle. And this does sometimes happen with short gardens where there's existing rear outriggers. Something can be done on the roof that doesn't actually have a significant additional effect compared to that existing building.
Matt, did you want to add something?
Yeah, it's just because Councillor Carmel was asking how much. We don't have a technical assessment done here. This is on-site judgment, and we've looked at the circumstances of the actual site, and we consider it's an opinion of an officer. We've looked at that, and we feel that it would be not negligible, of course, but it would be insignificant.
Councillor Carmel.
I'll now move on to the second string, so to speak, of Mr. Schober's part, which was noise. And there is a concern that air source heat pumps installed have not been subject to assessments which adequately consider potential noise impacts. And in particular, also with the growth of the popularity of air source heat pumps, or ASHPs, I'll just call them easier, in particular, cumulative impacts from multiple ASHPs are springing up all over as we seek to become the greenest local authority in the country. Was a noise impact assessment undertaken as part of the planning process? And if a noise impact assessment was undertaken, was the assessment based on MCS 020 planning standard, which is, as I'm sure you're aware, the microgeneration certification scheme?
So there was a noise assessment carried out as part of the application, was submitted with it. It was reviewed by the environmental protection team. So they had a look at it. They were satisfied with the conclusions it came to, but they asked for a condition which includes a post-installation assessment, so that if there is any breach of the levels that we're looking to achieve there, then we can ask for further mitigation if necessary.
And then following on from that, the review of air source heat pump noise emissions, PDR guidance and regulation 53. This standard does not take into account cumulative impacts and adopts a fixed background sound level to underpin assessments, which means that noise impact assessments from air source heat pumps may not be adequately considered. Therefore, if the MCS system standard was used, even when associated with a full application, it may not mean that significant adverse impacts are avoided or minimized.
Sorry, I'm not sure what the question was there.
I did ask originally
Okay.
What was the assessment method used to do the noise impact assessment?
I don't have the noise assessment in front of me. However, the public protection officer is the specialist in that particular area. And as I say, they've reviewed it and they were satisfied with the methodology that was used in order to carry that out. And they were happy on the basis of conditions with this post-installation assessment that the noise impacts upon neighbours would remain within acceptable limits.
Sorry, Chair, I would just also point out, again, may be helpful for committee members. Any planning permission doesn't sort of restrict in any way protections that residents have through other legislation, other environmental controls. So if for any reason these started breaching any of those controls, regardless of the planning permission, what conditions we have on, there is protection to residents under separate legislation and standards.
Members who've been on this committee for a while will know that I've been very keenly supportive of green measures, but I also do have to think about the impact on neighbours, and I'm finding myself deeply troubled by this because the effect on the Schober family, and as somebody who's recently had very young children as well, and I know how often they got woken by the merest noises like this. I will listen to see if there are any more questions, but I don't know which way I'm going on this one yet.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any further questions? No, I don't think there are any further questions. Okay, in that case, we will vote on this application. Firstly, we'll vote on whether recommendation 1 in the report is agreed, and that's on page 75. Councillor Melton?
For.
Councillor Tray?
For.
Councillor Walsh?
For.
Councillor Carmel? Councillor Pascoe-Tibere?
Against.
Councillor Carmel?
Against.
And I'll be voting for. So recommendation 1 in the report has been approved. Now we vote on recommendation 2, which is also on page 75. Councillor Melton?
For.
Councillor Tray?
For.
Councillor Walsh?
For.
Councillor Carmel?
For.
Councillor Pascoe-Tibere?
For.
I'll also be voting for. So that application has been approved. Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of tonight's meeting. I'd like to thank everyone for attending or watching. The draft minutes of this meeting will be published on our website shortly. These will be formally approved at our next meeting on the 2nd of July 2024. And if you have any queries concerning the applications in the interim, please contact the case officer in the report. Thank you very much.